They called her cursed, a woman born beneath a fractured moon. For years, she lived in silence, until the night the Alpha King appeared at her door, his eyes glowing like fire in the snow. He wasn't there to kill her, he was there to claim her. And what began as fear would soon become a bond powerful enough to shake both heaven and hell. The snow fell like sifted ash over the market square, dusting the air with the taste of iron and frost. The crowd pressed close around the raised platform, eager for spectacle, for trade, for cruelty disguised as commerce. I stood at the center, shackled at the wrists, my breath visible in pale clouds. The iron bit into my skin, already rubbed raw. The murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through dead trees. "She's the frost-marked one," someone whispered. "The cursed girl from the East Valley. Look at her hair, white as bone. The gods turn their face from that one." I'd heard it all before. Every word felt like an old bruise pressed fresh again. My father stood at the edge of the platform, his jaw set, his breath sour with mead. "Hold her still," he barked at the guards, as if I were a stubborn animal rather than his own blood. He did not look at me, not really. He looked at the pouch of silver coins waiting to erase his debts. "Gentlefolk," he shouted, his voice loud enough to cut through the murmurs. "Behold the frostborn girl, untouched by time or plague. Strong, obedient, fit for any household, or for breeding, should your line be blessed enough to tame her." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone tossed a coin that clattered at my feet. My father smiled. My mother was nowhere to be seen. She had not left the cottage when they came to take me, only turned her face to the wall as though I'd already died. "Begin the bidding," my father said. But before a single hand rose, the air shifted. A sound low, guttural, rolled through the market, like distant thunder. Every head turned. A figure approached from the northern road. He moved through the snow with the silence of a shadow, his cloak sweeping behind him like a dark tide. Beneath the hood, I glimpsed silver hair glinting like moonlight, and eyes so pale they seemed carved from ice itself. The guards at the gate stepped aside without command. "That's him," someone whispered. "The Frostborn Alpha." I'd heard the name in taverns, spoken only after enough drink to numb the fear. A ruler of the tundra wilds. Half-wolf, half something worse. A king without mercy. The man, Kale, they called him, stopped before the platform. His presence made the air colder, thinner. My father bowed, his hands trembling despite the grin he forced. "My lord," he said, "an offering worthy of your kind. Pale as the snow itself, strong and untouched." Kale said nothing. His gaze moved to me, and the rest of the world seemed to fade. His eyes were not the color of mortal frost but liquid mercury, shifting and alive. The crowd's whispers dulled to nothing. My heartbeat slowed and thundered all at once. He stepped forward. The snow did not dare cling to his boots. "Who marked her?" His voice was low, but it carried, each word edged with command. My father blinked. "Marked, my lord." Kale's gaze sharpened. "Her wrist. The sigil beneath her skin." I looked down without meaning to. The faint shimmer of light pulsed beneath the veins on my left wrist, something that had appeared days before the guards dragged me from home. I'd thought it a trick of the cold. My father laughed uneasily. "A birthmark, nothing more. The frost does strange things to flesh." "Liar." The single word silenced him. Kale reached out and, with one effortless motion, broke the chain that bound me. The iron links shattered like glass. I stumbled forward, nearly falling, but his hand caught my arm, strong, cold, steady. The moment his skin met mine, the mark beneath my wrist flared, glowing faintly silver. The air between us rippled. A soundless hum filled my ears, vibrating in my bones. Kale's expression did not change, but something ancient flickered behind his eyes. "She is not for sale." My father's face drained of color. "My lord, please, she's..." Kale turned his gaze on him, and the words died in his throat. "She belongs to the frostbound bloodline," Kale said quietly. "And to me." A murmur spread through the crowd. My pulse thudded in my ears. "I don't belong to anyone. I said, the words escaping before fear could silence them. Kale's eyes found mine again, and for a heartbeat, I saw something dangerous there. Something like amusement or hunger. No, he murmured. Not yet. He removed his cloak and draped it around my shoulders. It was heavy, lined with white fur that smelled faintly of pine and frost. Warmth seeped into my skin despite the cold. The gesture drew gasps from the crowd. It was a symbol, the mantle of an alpha. Not a cloak, but a claim. Kale turned without another word. His guards, pale and silent, fell into step behind him. One paused and gestured for me to follow. I hesitated. Behind me, my father watched with wide, terrified eyes, the broken chains still dangling from his hand. He had sold me for silver and lost his soul instead. I took a step forward, then another. The snow crunched beneath my bare feet as I followed the frostborn alpha out of the market and into the frozen dusk. The crowd parted like water. No one dared speak. No one dared breathe. And though fear twisted deep in my gut, a strange whisper echoed in my mind, soft and relentless. You were never meant to be theirs. The wind howled across the open tundra, dragging ghostly curtains of snow over the earth. The world was a palette of white and gray, endless and merciless. The only color came from the fur-lined cloak Kale had thrown around my shoulders, a mantle far too grand for someone like me. I sat stiffly in the sled, the air so cold it burned with every breath. Wolves, if they could even be called that, pulled us through the frost. They were massive, their coats like shards of moonlight, their eyes glimmering faintly blue. The sound of their paws against the snow was rhythmic, hypnotic. Kale sat across from me, silent. The silver in his eyes caught every flicker of light, turning his gaze into something otherworldly. His posture was relaxed, but there was an unmistakable weight to him, like a storm waiting to break. I wanted to ask where we were going. I wanted to demand why he'd torn me from the only home I'd ever known. But the words tangled on my tongue. Finally, I managed, "You could have left me there." Kale didn't answer at first. His eyes drifted to the horizon, where the pale sun bled weakly through a veil of clouds. "You think they would have let you live?" I stiffened. I didn't ask for any of this. His gaze slid back to me, steady, unreadable. No one asks for destiny. The word made something inside me twist. Destiny, I repeated, half laughing. My destiny was to be sold like livestock. Don't dress it up as something divine. For the first time, his expression shifted, a flicker of something sharp, almost anger, but quieter. You call it cruelty because you do not yet understand what you are. What I am, I echoed bitterly. I'm a girl with bad luck and colder blood than most. That's all. Kale's eyes softened, though his voice did not. No. You are frostmarked. Blood of the pale line. The last of what was lost when the moons broke. I blinked. The moons? He turned away again, his profile sharp against the snow. Long before mortals built their villages and forgot the gods, the sky held two moons. One white, one red. Together, they kept the balance between shadow and flame. His tone was low, measured, like someone reciting an oath he'd carried too long. When the red moon shattered, its fragments fell upon the world. Those touched by its light were changed, gifted, cursed, bound to forces neither mortal nor divine. The frostmarked were born of that fall. The story should have sounded absurd, but the mark beneath my wrist throbbed faintly in answer, a pulse of silver light beneath the skin. I pressed my palm over it. "Stop," I whispered. "You're lying." "I don't lie," Kale said simply. My throat tightened. "Then why me?" His gaze returned to me, steady and consuming. "Because your blood called to mine." The air between us felt heavier. The bond, whatever it was, throbbed like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I turned away, staring at the endless expanse of snow rushing past. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the hiss of wind. The wolves ran tireless, the world blurring into silver and white. My body ached, but sleep refused to come. When I finally spoke again, my voice was small. Do you kill people? Kale didn't flinch. Sometimes. For what? For threatening what is mine. The words sank into me like stones. He didn't elaborate and I didn't ask again. By the time the sled slowed, dusk had swallowed the sky. We stopped before a ridge where the earth rose into pale cliffs. Light glimmered faintly along the stone surface, veins of frozen crystal. Above it, towers of ice jutted toward the clouds, lit from within by a cold blue glow. I couldn't speak. Kale stepped down first, his boots sinking into the snow. The frost spire, he said quietly. My home. It wasn't a fortress. It was a monument to something older than time, walls that breathed cold, arches carved from frozen rivers. The wolves unhitched themselves, padding silently toward the shadows. Kale extended his hand to me. You're safe now. I stared at the offered hand, hesitation clawing at my chest. Safe? You mean imprisoned somewhere grander? His lips curved faintly. If I wanted you caged, I'd have left the chains. I didn't take his hand. I climbed down on my own, the cold biting my bare feet through the thin soles of my shoes. The moment I stepped onto the ice, the mark on my wrist flared brighter, reacting to something in the air. Kale's gaze lingered on it. It knows its home. I ignored the words and followed him through towering gates carved with runes that shimmered faintly as we passed. Inside, the corridors glowed with veins of light under the ice. Blue fire burned in sconces that gave no smoke. Servants appeared, tall, silent, their eyes faintly luminous. They bowed as Kale passed, but their gazes darted to me with thinly veiled suspicion. At the end of a long corridor, we stopped before double doors inlaid with silver symbols. Kale brushed his fingers across them, and they opened soundlessly. The chamber beyond took my breath. A vast room of clear ice, walls gleaming like mirrors, a white fire burning in a sunken hearth. Above, the ceiling shimmered with light refracted through the ice, scattering rainbows across the furs piled near the fire. This will be your room, Kale said. I spun on him. My room? I didn't ask to stay here. He met my glare, without flinching. No. But the bond demands proximity. If you wander too far, it will tear at you. Tear at me? His eyes flicked to my wrist again. You'll feel it soon enough. The mark pulsed once, as if to prove him right. Sleep, he said. We will speak more when the sun rises. He turned to leave, but I called out, Kale. He paused at the door. What if I don't want this? He looked over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. One has nothing to do with fate, Lyra. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him like a whisper of snow. I stood alone, the weight of the fur cloak heavy on my shoulders, the bond humming faintly beneath my skin. Outside, the wind screamed across the mountains, but inside, only one thought echoed through my mind. He said I was his. But what if he's wrong? The next morning, the light that filtered through the frost crystal walls was thin and blue, like dawn seen through the bottom of a frozen lake. I had not slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kale's face, the pale gleam of his eyes, the way his voice wrapped around the word mine as though it was a prayer and a sentence both. The fur cloak still clung to my shoulders when a faint knock echoed through the door. Before I could answer, it opened, and a young woman stepped inside. She was impossibly tall, her hair as white as new snow, but her eyes, a piercing violet, were alive with something almost human. My name is Lyra, she said, voice cool and even. The Alpha has ordered that you be fed and dressed properly. He expects you in the Hall of Echoes by nightfall. I frowned. He expects me? Her expression didn't shift. Few defy him twice. That told me enough. I swallowed my retort and let her lead me through the fortress. The frost spire was vast, built more like a living being than stone. The walls pulsed faintly with veins of blue light, and each corridor whispered with the echo of wind from deep within the ice. As we walked, Lyra spoke softly, though never quite meeting my eyes. They say your arrival was foretold, she murmured. That your blood will either restore the Alpha's power or destroy it. I didn't ask for prophecy. I said under my breath. No one ever does, she replied. At the end of a long corridor, she stopped before a mirror, tall, rimmed with silver that shimmered like frozen moonlight. This belonged to the first Frost Queen, Lyra said. She saw every truth except her own. She gestured toward the gown draped across a chair nearby. Wear this. The Alpha doesn't tolerate disrespect at his table. When she left, I hesitated only a moment before approaching the mirror. My reflection looked more like a ghost than a woman. White hair tangled from sleep, eyes pale gray with a ring of blue that glowed faintly when the light touched them. The gown was woven from silk the color of stormlight, shimmering between silver and blue. It fit too perfectly, as though made for me long ago. When I entered the Hall of Echoes that evening, every conversation stopped. The chamber stretched for what felt like miles, pillars of carved ice rising into shadow. At its center sat a long table made of crystal, surrounded by Kale's council. Beings too beautiful to be mortal, their features sharp as glass, and their eyes gleaming faintly in shades of frost. And at the far end, Kale himself. He wore no crown, yet the air around him felt like kneeling. His cloak hung heavy over his shoulders, trimmed in white fur, and when his gaze found mine, the world narrowed to nothing but that silver light. Lyra, he said, my name rolling off his tongue like smoke curling through fire. Sit. I did, though every muscle screamed not to. To his right, a man with hair as dark as midnight leaned forward. This is the frost-marked mortal? His tone dripped disdain. She looks fragile enough to shatter in the cold. Kale didn't look at him. Appearances deceive. Or doom us, said another counselor, a woman with hair like icicles and eyes of blue flame. You bring a mortal into the frost spire, while the hunters gather in the south. You risk the bond awakening before the moon's turn. Kale's jaw tightened. The bond has awakened. The room fell silent. The counselor's eyes flicked to me, sharp as daggers. Then she will burn you. I stiffened. I didn't ask to. Kale's voice cut clean through mine. Enough. The single word echoed, low and resonant. Frost crept across the edges of the table where his hands rested, shimmering with pale light. You will not question her place again. The counselor bowed her head, but her voice still trembled with venom. Then pray she does not destroy you, my king. When the meeting ended, Kale rose. His gaze caught mine. Walk with me. I followed him into a corridor lined with high arched windows that opened onto a blizzard of stars. The cold didn't bite here. It hummed. Beneath the glass, faint runes glowed across the ice floor like constellations. What is this place? I asked quietly. The heart of the Frost Spire, he said. Every alpha before me sealed their blood here to keep the barrier between realms intact. He stopped, turning to face me fully. But that barrier is weakening. And you, Lyra, you are the key that can restore it. I shook my head. You keep saying things like that. Bond, key, prophecy. But none of it makes sense. I'm not special. I'm not even brave. You're alive, Kale said softly. That's more than most who carry your blood can say. What are you talking about? He studied me for a long moment before answering. There were others before you. Frost-marked mortals born under the shattered moon. The hunters found them, killed them. They feared what they could become. And what am I supposed to become? I whispered. His expression was unreadable. The one who can end me, or save us both. The mark on my wrist pulsed, silver light curling beneath my skin like breath trapped in glass. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw the same glow flicker faintly under his collarbone, as if his body answered mine. I stepped back, my pulse stuttering. No, I said. Whatever this is, I didn't choose it. Kale's eyes softened, though his voice stayed low and unyielding. Neither did I. He turned then, the fur of his cloak sweeping across the ice. The bond does not wait for choice. It only waits for recognition. I watched him walk away, his form blurring into the blue light until he was nothing but a silhouette against the frost. My wrist burned with the mark's glow, faint but steady, like a second heartbeat calling to something I wasn't ready to understand. The fortress walls trembled before dawn. Lyra awoke to the sound of steel against stone, the deep echo of horns rolling through the frozen air. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, that the shadows flickering across her chamber walls were tricks of the white firelight. But then the sound came again. Closer. Sharper. Screams. She pushed herself from the bed, the fur cloak slipping from her shoulders. The cold bit her skin instantly, but it wasn't the cold that made her tremble. It was the scent, iron and ash carried on the air.
Blood.
When she reached the arched window, she saw them. Dozens of figures in black cloaks storming across the snow, torches blazing. Their weapons glowed faintly, silver-laced with runes that burned like coals. Hunters. Panic clawed up her throat. Kale had told her once, softly, almost absently, that the hunters had long since forgotten mercy. They didn't kill for justice. They killed for coin, for legend, for fear. And now they had come for her. The door burst open. A guard, pale as frost, stumbled through. "My queen," he caught himself mid-word, bowing quickly. "Lyra, you must stay inside." The king. But she was already running. The corridor outside pulsed with blue firelight. Servants fled in silence. Warriors in white armor passed her, their eyes glowing faintly like wolves under the moon. Every one of them bowed as she ran by, not in mockery, not in reverence, but in acknowledgement. They knew. At the end of the hall, the great doors to the outer ramparts loomed. Lyra pressed a hand against them and pushed. The icy air beyond nearly stole her breath. The world outside was chaos. Snow whipped sideways, thick and sharp as shards of glass. The sky burned with red light, not from dawn but from magic. On the far ridge, the hunters advanced in formation, their leader tall, cloaked in black, a mask of bone covering half his face. In his hand, a blade shimmered darkly, etched with a symbol Lyra didn't recognize. And at the heart of it all stood Kale. The Alpha King was a vision of winter's wrath made flesh. His white hair whipped in the wind, his cloak flared like wings of frost, his eyes glowing silver bright enough to rival the storm. He moved through the battlefield with impossible grace, every swing of his sword cutting through men and magic alike. But the hunters didn't falter. The masked leader raised his blade, shouting words in a tongue Lyra didn't know. The air split open, and a pulse of crimson light rippled through the snow. Kale staggered, just a fraction, and the world shifted. Lyra felt it at once. The bond between them flared, hot and sudden, pulling tight around her ribs like a noose. She gasped, dropping to her knees. Her pulse thundered. Her blood burned. Kale's voice echoed through the storm, not spoken but felt. "Stay back, Lyra." But she couldn't. Something deep inside her, that same pulse of fire she'd felt since his blood touched hers, surged upward, demanding release. The bond throbbed harder, each beat a call she could no longer ignore. She ran down the steps, snow stinging her skin, until her feet hit the courtyard. A dozen warriors turned, shouting for her to retreat, but she didn't hear them. The noise of battle faded, swallowed by the wild rhythm in her veins. Kale turned toward her, eyes blazing, fury and fear colliding in one impossible look. "Lyra, no." Too late. The masked hunter saw her first. His blade lifted, gleaming red in the stormlight. Lyra raised her hands to shield herself, and the world exploded. White fire erupted from her palms, blinding and pure. It struck the hunter mid-stride, tearing through armor and flesh in a single wave. His screams split the air, brief and sharp, before his body dissolved into ash. Silence. Every vampire, every hunter, every watching eye froze. Lyra stood trembling in the snow, her hands still aglow, her breath ragged. Smoke curled from her fingertips. The air around her shimmered with heat. Kale stepped toward her slowly, his sword still dripping red. His silver eyes widened, not in anger, but awe. "The fire," he whispered. "You've awakened it." Lyra looked down at her hands, horror and wonder colliding. What did I do?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written in the way the bond pulsed now, not pain, but power. A rhythm that matched his heartbeat. She wasn't cursed. She was born of fire and moonlight. And the war for her had only just begun. The battle didn't end when the last hunter fell. It lingered. In the air, in the silence, in the faint scent of smoke that clung to the snow. Lyra stood motionless as the white flames faded from her skin, leaving behind a faint shimmer that pulsed with every heartbeat. The power that had erupted from her moments ago now coiled deep within, restless but waiting, as though it had merely been testing the strength of its cage. Kale's boots crunched against the frost as he approached. The world seemed to shrink with each step he took. His silver eyes burned through the swirling snow, locked on her. "You disobeyed me," he said finally, voice calm, but laced with something deeper. Fear? Relief? Both. Lyra swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "You were dying." He stopped before her, his sword still hanging loosely in his hand. His gaze raked over her, from the soot on her skin to the faint white glow still flickering beneath her palms. "And so you thought to burn the battlefield instead?" His tone should have been scolding, but it wasn't. It was reverent, disbelieving. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I didn't even know I could." "You did," he interrupted softly, stepping closer. "The moment you saw me fall, you knew. The bond told you." The word thrummed between them. Bond. Heavy with power and something perilously close to longing. Lyra's breath came shallow. She wanted to look away, but Kale's gaze pinned her in place. The space between them buzzed with tension, the kind that wasn't born of danger, but of inevitability. "You saved me," he said finally, "and doomed us both." Before she could speak, the storm broke, a low rumble rolling across the horizon. Kale turned toward it, his expression hardening. "They'll return," he muttered. "They'll bring stronger weapons, darker magic. They'll come for you." Lyra's stomach twisted. "Then let me fight with you." His eyes snapped back to hers, sharp as a blade. "You've no idea what you ask." "I know what I saw," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I saw you bleed for me. I saw them die for me. If I hide while others burn, then what kind of power is this?" Kale stared at her in silence. Then, slowly, a faint smile touched his lips, a dangerous thing, fleeting as lightning. "Spoken like a queen," he murmured. The word struck her harder than any blow. Queen. It wasn't a title. It was a promise. Before she could respond, a shadow moved behind him. One of his generals, tall, pale, eyes the color of frozen rivers. "My king," he said, bowing low. "The walls hold, but the outer watch fell. We must retreat to the inner keep." Kale nodded once. Then his hand closed gently, but firmly, around Lyra's wrist. The contact was electric. His skin was cold, but the bond beneath it burned. "Come," he said. She followed without thinking. Through the winding corridors of the fortress they moved, the white flames flickering along the walls in rhythm with the tremors of battle outside. At every turn, vampires paused to bow, eyes flicking to Lyra with a mix of fear and wonder. The whispers followed her, moonborn, fireblood, the king's bond. When they reached the war chamber, Kale stopped. The room was circular, carved entirely from ice. At its center stood a great table etched with silver maps and glowing runes. He turned to her, his cloak swirling. "The hunters know what you are now. They'll send priests next, sorcerers, mages. They'll seek to use your blood to open the veil itself." Lyra frowned. "The veil?" He looked at her, then really looked at her. And for the first time since the battle began, she saw it. Not just power. Not just danger. Weariness. "The barrier between realms," he said. "Between our world and the void beyond. Once, it was sealed by the moon's light. But when the moon fractured, his gaze flicked briefly toward the window, where the pale, broken crescent hung low. So did the gate that holds back the dark." Lyra's chest tightened. "And they want to break it completely." He nodded once. "To erase what's left of us. To unmake the night itself." Silence fell, the kind that vibrated. Heavy. Sacred. Then Kale stepped closer, his voice low. That's why you were born, Lyra. Not to burn. To seal. The fire in you can restore what was broken, if you can learn to control it. She met his gaze, her fear warring with the strange warmth rising inside her. Then teach me. For a heartbeat, his expression softened. His eyes flickered down, to her lips, to the faint glow still pulsing in her veins, and then back up again. Be careful what you ask for, he whispered. Once the fire awakens, it never sleeps. And as he turned away, Lyra realized something that made her blood run cold. The hunters weren't her only threat. The fire inside her, the very thing that tied her to him, wanted more than to protect. It wanted to consume. The next dawn never came. The storm swallowed the sky, smothering the sun beneath endless gray. Inside the fortress, the air hung thick with the scent of frost and blood. The battle beyond the mountains had slowed, but tension clung to every wall like frostbite. Lyra hadn't slept. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fire. White, wild, and beautiful. Her fire. When the door creaked open, she startled. Kale stood there, framed by the cold light. His cloak was gone. His hair, damp from the snow, clung to his temples. He looked less like a king and more like something carved from myth, unrelenting, eternal. Dress warmly, he said simply. We begin now. Her pulse leapt. Now? After everything that just happened. His lips twitched, almost a smile. Power doesn't rest. Neither can you. He led her through the fortress, down corridors lined with crystal veins, and into the open wild. The storm had quieted to a whisper. Beyond the walls stretched an endless tundra of white and blue, ice glinting like fractured mirrors under a ghostly moon. Kale stopped at the edge of a frozen lake. The surface was still, perfectly smooth, reflecting the broken moon above like a wound in the world. This place remembers, he said quietly. Every moonborn has trained here. Everyone who failed left the scars you see beneath the ice. Lyra swallowed hard. Beneath the glassy surface, she saw faint shapes, silhouettes, human and not, frozen mid-motion. Failed, she whispered. Consumed, Kale corrected softly. The fire within them outgrew their bodies. That's what happens when power exceeds will. He turned to face her fully. Your fire is alive, Lyra. It feels your fear, your anger, your heart. Control it, or it will devour you and me with it. Her throat tightened. Then show me how. For a long moment, he only looked at her. Then, without warning, he stepped forward, his hand brushing her cheek. Cold. Steady. Close your eyes. She obeyed, though her heart raced. Breathe, he murmured. Not with your lungs, with your pulse. Feel it, the bond. The word rippled through her like lightning. She felt it then, faint, deep, like another heartbeat echoing within her. It pulsed in rhythm with his. Now find the fire, he whispered. It's not anger. It's hunger. But it can be tamed. Lyra exhaled slowly. Heat bloomed beneath her ribs. It spread outward through her arms, her fingertips, her throat. The cold wind around her began to stir, melting frost in small, perfect circles. But then she faltered. The fire surged too fast, too wild. Flames licked her skin, white and gold, swirling, chaotic. Kale, she gasped. His hand shot out, catching her wrist. The moment he touched her, the fire steadied, pulled into rhythm with his heartbeat. The pain vanished. Her eyes snapped open. They stood inches apart, her breath shallow, his eyes molten silver. The air between them shimmered with heat. That, he said softly, voice rough, is what it means to share the bond. Your chaos, my control. My strength, your spark. Her heart thundered. And if I lose control again? His lips curved faintly. Then I burn. The simplicity of his words terrified her more than any prophecy. He released her hand, and the warmth faded instantly. She felt hollow without it, empty in a way she didn't want to understand. Again, he commanded. Hours passed. The lake's surface steamed. Frost melted in slow circles around her feet. The fire came easier this time, flowing smoother, guided by his voice, his steady gaze. Each time it grew unstable, Cale would step closer, his presence anchoring her, his words grounding her like gravity. Good, he murmured once, his hand at her back, the heat between them unbearable. Don't fight the flame. Shape it. She inhaled sharply, the bond sparking under her skin. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said, his tone quiet, almost regretful. Power never is, especially when it loves the hand that holds it. Her breath caught, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. The fire flared, bright and wild, spinning around them in a ring of white light. Cale didn't flinch. He stepped into it. The flames licked his armor, his throat, his hands, but didn't burn him. The bond pulsed again, stronger than before. When the light finally faded, Lyra was trembling, exhausted, but alive. Cale stood before her untouched. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You learn fast, he said softly. Too fast. She tried to smile. You sound worried. I am, he replied simply. Because the last moonborn who learned as quickly as you ended the world. The wind howled across the lake. Lyra's heart stuttered. What do you mean? Cale turned toward the horizon. His voice, when it came, was quiet, the kind of quiet that carried truth like a blade. She wasn't my first bond, he said. And she wasn't my last mistake. The lake cracked beneath their feet, splitting the reflection of the moon in two. And for the first time, Lyra wondered, was her power meant to save him? Or finish what the last one started? The sound of the cracking ice echoed through the frozen valley like thunder. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she stared at Cale's back. He stood motionless, his silver hair fluttering against the wind, his eyes fixed on the jagged fissure that had split the lake clean in half. The reflection of the fractured moon shimmered between the broken ice, as though the heavens themselves had just been wounded. What do you mean? She whispered again, her voice shaking. The last one, who was she? Cale's silence was heavier than any answer. His shoulders were rigid, a king carved from regret. When he finally spoke, his words were quieter than snow falling on steel. She was called Sarai, he said. And once, long ago, she stood where you stand now. Lyra's heart skipped. She was moonborn? He nodded. The first in centuries. The first after the moon's fracture. I found her in the ruins of a village, half-starved, half-mad, hunted by men who feared her glow. I thought she was my salvation. He turned to her then, his expression unreadable. I was wrong. Lyra swallowed hard, but said nothing. Cale stepped forward, the frost crunching beneath his boots. She burned everything. My city, my people, the night itself. They called at the firefall, when the sky turned white, and every shadow screamed. His eyes flicked toward the ice, and Lyra saw it now, faint shapes frozen beneath the surface, as if the lake remembered the screams. What happened to her? Cale's jaw tightened. She lost control of her bond. The fire in her became hunger. It devoured everything, even me. I survived only because I severed our connection. Her stomach twisted. You killed her. His gaze met hers, sharp, unflinching. No, he said softly. I let her die. She begged me to. The wind howled between them, a mournful sound that seemed to echo the ghosts beneath the ice. Lyra's chest tightened painfully. The thought of that, of love turned ruin, struck too close. And now you think, she hesitated, the words catching. You think I'll end the same way. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. Lyra turned from him, her hands trembling. Then why bring me here? She demanded. Why save me, if you think I'm just another disaster waiting to happen? Because I can't let it happen again, he said. His voice, though low, cracked like thunder across the lake. Because I saw her eyes in yours. Because every part of me that burned once in grief burns again in hope. Her throat ached. That's not fair. I'm not her. No, Kale said, stepping closer. You're stronger. He reached for her hand, but this time she pulled back. And if I'm not? If I can't control it, then I burn, he said again, quietly, like an oath. But if you can, if you master it, you could save what's left of this world. Lyra's chest tightened. The prophecy, the bond, the power. Every word from his mouth sounded like destiny, but destiny felt like a trap. She looked down at her reflection, her white hair catching the moonlight, her pale skin glowing faintly. The same marks that had cursed her among humans now shone like symbols of divinity. And yet, when she met her own eyes in the ice, all she saw was fear. I can't be what you want, she said finally. Kale's voice softened, but his words struck deep. It's not what I want, Lyra. It's what the fire already decided. Before she could respond, the wind shifted. The air grew heavier, the sharp scent of iron and ash carried across the tundra. Kale stiffened instantly, head snapping toward the horizon. Hunters, he muttered. Too soon. Lyra followed his gaze. Beyond the ridge, a faint red glow pulsed against the snow. Torches, dozens of them. But mixed with the light were other shapes. Shadows, moving unnaturally fast. Kale's expression darkened. Not just hunters. Wraiths. The word made the air colder. Lyra had heard it before, whispered in the marketplace when she was a child. Wraiths were what remained of souls torn through the veil, not living, not dead, bound by hunger alone. How? The sorcerer, Kale said grimly. He's breaking the gate again. He turned toward her, eyes blazing silver. Go back to the fortress. Find the inner sanctum. It will shield you from the dark. She shook her head immediately. No. You said my fire can seal the veil. Let me fight. This isn't a fight, Kale said sharply. This is survival. He turned away, drawing his sword, the blade gleaming like captured moonlight. I won't lose you to the same fire that took her. Lyra's hands clenched at her sides. I'm not her, she whispered again, but this time it wasn't defiance. It was a promise. The fire stirred beneath her skin, faint, eager, answering the call of the danger approaching. And when the first scream tore across the snow, the sound of the dead returned to life, Lyra didn't run. She stepped forward. Her pulse thrummed in rhythm with his. Her fire flickered to life like a heartbeat. If Sarai had burned the world, Lyra would rebuild it in flame. And this time, the Alpha King would not stand alone. The snow trembled. Then it screamed. A sound tore through the valley, low at first, almost human, until it grew into a chorus of shrieks that split the air. The horizon bled red and black as the torches vanished one by one, swallowed by the advancing dark. Lyra stood frozen at the edge of the frozen lake, her heart pounding in her ears. The air itself seemed to pulse with malice. Shadows twisted against the snow, growing taller, sharper. Bodies without shape, eyes like coals smoldering in void. Wraiths, she breathed, barely above a whisper. Kale stepped in front of her, his sword drawn. The silver glow of his blade cut a faint line between them and the darkness. His voice was low, calm, the tone of someone who had faced death before and perhaps welcomed it. Stay behind me. The words sparked something stubborn in her chest. If I stay behind you, I'll only watch you die. Kale's eyes flicked toward her, hard and quick. Then watch closely, he murmured, and learn. The first wraith lunged, a shadow streak of hunger and claws. Kale's blade flashed once, cleaving through the creature's form. The impact sent a burst of black mist spiraling into the wind. But it didn't fall, it reformed, howling, the wound sealing as though time itself obeyed its rage. They don't die, Lyra whispered. Not by steel, Kale said. Only by light. Her stomach twisted. You mean my light? Yes. His silver eyes found hers, steady, unyielding. You said you wanted to fight. Now's the moment. She could barely breathe. Her hands trembled as she raised them. The bond pulsed once between them, his calm seeping into her panic, his strength tempering her fear. The fire inside her stirred, responding to him. "Breathe," he commanded. "Let it answer me, not your fear." She inhaled, and the world lit up. White fire burst from her palms, swirling outward in ribbons of light. It wasn't wild this time. It moved like a living thing, like it knew its target. The flames tore through the nearest wraith, consuming it in silence. Where it had stood, nothing remained but drifting snowflakes, glittering faintly in the air. Kale's lips parted, the faintest flicker of awe crossing his face. "You're controlling it." Lyra barely heard him. More shadows surged forward, dozens now, clawing through the blizzard, their cries shaking the ice beneath her feet. The fortress bells began to toll in the distance, warning, summoning. Too late. Kale slashed through the nearest one, his blade flaring with silver light each time the fire brushed against it. Lyra felt every movement through the bond, his pulse matching hers, their hearts hammering as one. The wraiths closed in, circling. The light faltered. "Focus." Kale barked. "Don't give it doubt." "I'm trying," she cried, tears stinging her eyes as the fire sputtered. "It's too much." The bond snapped taut like a wire. Suddenly his hand was at her back, firm and grounding. "Then use me." "What?" "Anchor your fire to mine. Burn through me." She turned her head sharply. "You said it would kill you." "It might," he said with a ghost of a smile. "But better my death than your despair." The word struck something inside her, a chord that resonated deep and dangerous. She pressed her palms against his back, feeling the cold armor beneath her hands, the solid rhythm of his heartbeat. And then she let go. Light exploded from her chest, rushing through him like a flood. The bond flared white-hot, connecting their souls like molten glass. Kale's body arched slightly, but he didn't fall. The fire didn't destroy him, it merged. His silver eyes blazed brighter than the moon. His sword shone pure white. Every swing left trails of flame that tore through wraiths like lightning splitting a storm. Lyra's power flowed into him, alive, infinite. Together, they became the storm. The battlefield vanished in fire and frost. Wraiths screamed as they burned away, their shadows evaporating under the force of their combined light. The snow melted beneath their feet, and the sky itself glowed silver. When it was over, silence fell again. The only sound was Lyra's ragged breathing and the slow drip of melting ice. Kale turned toward her, the glow fading from his eyes. His skin was pale, too pale. "Kale." He sank to one knee, the sword slipping from his hand. The bond pulsed erratically, flickering, fading. "No," she whispered, rushing to him. She caught his shoulders, her palms pressing against his cold skin. "Don't you dare." He looked up at her, the faintest trace of a smile ghosting his lips. "You see? Even in fire, I can still burn for you." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pulled him close. His strength was ebbing fast, but the bond still pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat refusing to die. Then, faint and distant, a horn sounded from the mountain, low and guttural. Not the call of hunters. Something else. Kale's eyes widened slightly. "They've awakened it." Lyra froze. "What?" "The Veil Gate," he whispered, voice breaking. The wraiths were only the beginning. He reached for her hand, his grip trembling but sure. "Whatever comes next, don't let the fire die." The ground beneath them trembled. A crack split the frozen plain in two, glowing red from below. Lyra looked up and saw the sky bleeding light again. The war for the moon had only just begun. The sound began as a low hum, deep, primal, older than the wind. Then the ice beneath Lyra's feet split open, veins of crimson light searing through the white expanse like open wounds. Kale staggered, his weight heavy against her shoulder, every breath labored. The bond between them flickered violently, fading in and out like a candle struggling against a storm. "Kale," she whispered, gripping him tighter. "Stay with me." He tried to answer, but his voice was weak. "The veil, they're breaking it. I can feel it." And then she saw it. The horizon itself tore open. A jagged rift, like claws had ripped through the fabric of the world, yawned across the tundra. From its center spilled black fire and smoke, the air alive with the stench of decay. Something moved inside it. Something vast. Figures writhed in the light. Too many limbs. Too many faces. The shapes of men and beasts and shadows all stitched together. It crawled through the tear in reality, pulling itself into the mortal realm. Lyra's blood turned to ice. What is that? Kale's gaze hardened. The devourer. The first shadow born when the moon fractured. The one the gods sealed beyond the veil. He looked up at her, silver eyes burning with equal parts awe and dread. And now it knows your name. Her breath caught. Across the battlefield, a voice echoed, cold, resonant, layered with whispers that weren't human. It wasn't spoken in words, but the sound still lodged itself in her mind. Lyra. The syllables were soft but thunderous, like her name had been carved into the world itself. Kale's fingers tightened weakly on her arm. Don't listen. It's voice that burrows into the soul. But the whisper came again, closer this time, every echo cutting through her defenses like a blade made of memory. Daughter of the shattered moon, you are mine. Lyra's heart lurched. Images flooded her mind, her childhood, the nights of loneliness, the whispers of her mother calling her cursed. And now, a terrible realization began to form. What if it's right? She whispered. What if I am? Kale caught her chin, forcing her to look at him. His voice was hoarse, but every word struck like iron. You are not its child. You are mine. Do you understand? Tears blurred her vision. But I can feel it, Kale. It's calling me. The fire, it's reacting. He shook his head. Because it wants your light, the same way it wanted hers. Sarai, Lyra whispered. Kale's expression faltered for the briefest moment, the ghost of that name cutting through the steel of his resolve. Yes. She listened to its voice. She believed it would make her strong, but it hollowed her out and wore her like a crown. He looked toward the gate again, the crimson glow washing across his pale skin. You are not her, Lyra. You will not fall the same way. The ground quaked again, harder this time. The crack widened, splitting the frozen plain into shards. From the abyss rose a figure, towering, skeletal, and wreathed in shadow. Its head was crowned with the fractured remains of a moonstone helm. Its eyes were twin voids, swallowing all light. When it spoke, the sky trembled. Your light belongs to me. Kale staggered forward, lifting his blade with both hands. Over my dead body. The devourer laughed, a sound like 1,000 dying stars. Then so be it. The blast came before Lyra could move, a wave of black energy that shattered the ice and sent her tumbling backward. Kale met it head-on, his sword flashing white as he deflected the impact. The force still drove him to his knees. He roared, his voice echoing like thunder across the valley. Lyra, the fire. Her vision swam. Her palms glowed faintly, but the power was unstable, slipping, twisting, threatening to consume her from the inside. I can't control it, she cried. Kale looked over his shoulder, blood streaking the corner of his mouth. Then stop trying to control it. Let it know who you are. Something inside her snapped. The fire surged upward, no longer white, but blinding gold. It poured from her skin like liquid sunlight, meeting the storm of darkness head-on. The devourer screamed as the two forces collided, light and shadow clashing in a storm of impossible power. Kale forced himself to his feet and stumbled toward her. The heat scorched his armor, his hands, but he didn't stop. He reached her just as she faltered, catching her before she collapsed. Listen to me, he rasped. The fire was never a curse. It was a promise. She looked up at him, tears cutting tracks through the ash on her cheeks. And you? You said if I lose control. Then I burn, he said, smiling faintly through the pain. And I will burn gladly. He pressed his forehead against hers, the bond between them igniting like a living flame. Every heartbeat merged. Every breath intertwined. Together, he whispered. Lyra nodded, her voice breaking. Together. They turned as one. Kale's sword flared to life, glowing silver bright, while Lyra's hands erupted in gold. The light between them fused into something neither could claim alone, a new brilliance, born of shadow and fire, of curse and salvation. They struck. The devourer's scream split the sky. Its body convulsed, unraveling under the surge of their combined light. The crimson rift behind it began to collapse, folding inward like burning parchment. The darkness fought back, tendrils of void wrapping around Kale's form, dragging him toward the gate. Kale! Lyra screamed, reaching for him. His grip tightened around her wrist, but even she could feel the pull of the veil tearing at his soul. It needs a seal, he gasped. Someone must stay to close it. No. She shook her head, fire and tears blurring her vision. We can find another way. There isn't one, he said, his tone breaking for the first time. You are the light, Lyra. The world needs you. She clutched his hand desperately. Then I'll stay with you. He smiled weakly. You already have. Before she could speak again, he leaned forward and kissed her. Fierce, desperate, final. The fire surged between them, their souls flaring so brightly that the darkness recoiled. Then, with one last push, Kale wrenched his hand free and hurled her backward. Live, he whispered. The light consumed him. The rift imploded, collapsing in a roar that shook the heavens. Shadows screamed as they were torn apart, the devourer's voice fading into silence. And then nothing. Only falling snow. Lyra awoke on the frozen plain, her body trembling, her skin glowing faintly gold. The rift was gone. The sky was clear for the first time in centuries. The fractured moon above had begun to mend, its missing shard glowing faintly silver once more. She sat there for a long time, the silence pressing heavy on her heart. Then, faintly, she felt it, a pulse. Not hers. His. Deep in her chest, the bond still lived. Faint. Quiet. But alive. Lyra rose to her feet, the fur cloak falling around her shoulders. In the distance, the fortress of ice still stood, battered but unbroken. The wolves howled along its walls, mourning and revering in equal measure. She turned toward the mountains, her eyes glimmering like starlight. Kale had sealed the darkness beyond the veil, but she carried his light now. His strength. His legacy. The world would remember him as the White Alpha King, the ruler of the frost. But she would remember the truth. He was the fire that taught her how to burn without fear. And as she walked into the dawn, the first dawn the North had seen in centuries, the fractured moon mended fully, whole once more, bathing her in silver light. A whisper rode the wind, low and soft, carried from nowhere and everywhere at once. Together. Lyra smiled, tears glinting in her eyes as the snow melted beneath her steps. Always. The bond between Lyra and Kale wasn't just written in fate, it was forged in fire and frost, in sacrifice and love that defied the darkness itself. Even as the veil closed and the world turned silent once more, their promise remained, echoing through every heartbeat of the realm. If stories like this stir something inside you, if you believe in love that survives the impossible, then join us. Subscribe to this channel for more dark fantasy love stories, tales where passion meets destiny, and every ending hides the spark of a new beginning. Until next time, keep your fire alive.